Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have a fun chat today with my pal, Joanne Carducci, also known as JoJo from Jerz. We shall get to JoJo in a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe, and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So I'm sure a lot of you who are listening already know who JoJo from Jerz is. But for those who don't, she's a mom living in the Jersey suburbs who, in the wake of the 2016 election, was looking for an outlet to share her frustrations and fears about Donald Trump. So she joined Twitter, where she now has over 1 million followers. And she hasn't looked back since. She's also been to the White House a bunch of times. She's been featured on Saturday Night Live. It's been an incredible year for her. What was once a sounding board to vent with like-minded people has literally turned into a full-time commitment to stand up for democracy and against tyranny in her signature snark and sass. You can find her on all the socials at patreon.com/JoJo from Jerz, on her Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast, and over on Substack with her newsletter of the same name. JoJo, welcome back into the back room.
Hey, Andy, it's so good to be here.
I probably should have said JoJo with the 1 million Twitter followers.
That's what I introduce myself as everywhere, even like at my kids' schools. You know, I'm like, oh, hello, Mrs. Blankety Blank. I'm Joanne Carducci. I have 1 million followers on Twitter. It goes over really well.
Well, in all seriousness, congratulations. That is a huge milestone, and there's a pretty cool story behind that, right?
So Mark Hamill, he was on the other side of it. So when I hit 1 million, I met him like within 2 hours, which is a crazy story. Like I was on my way to Chicago, and my friend Joe was sending me the real time like numbers. So I was ordering a plane to go to Chicago, to go to the DNC. But the first night I was in Chicago, I was doing an event with Stephanie Miller that Mark Hamill was involved with. And so I'm boarding the plane, I'm seeing the numbers, and I hit 1 million as I'm about to sit in my seat. I'm like, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah, maybe I'm mistaken. Like, weren't you at like 999 and somebody said, help her get to 1 million?
Yeah, a couple people did. The first one was Henry Winkler.
Okay.
That was
maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
The first big one, because he's amazing, an incredible human being. And then a bunch of my friends picked up on it, which was awesome. And yeah, and so I was at like 999 something when I got to the airport. And then by the time I got on the plane, I sat down and it hit 1 million. And it was just kind of surreal because I remember telling my kids when I first got on Twitter, I remember it took a year to get to 1,000. I was working as a paraprofessional at the time. And I was like, guys, I have 1,000 Twitter followers. This is the coolest thing. 1,000 people in the world care about what I have to say.
So when you hit 1 million followers on Twitter, for those of us who don't have 1 million, do people come knocking on your doors? Like, does the world change? Like advertisers and people who want influencers and all that?
I wouldn't say, I mean, that.
Because 1 million is a lot. 1 million of anything.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I live in a town with like 13,000 people. So it's really crazy. Here's what it didn't change anything instantly, right? Like, I think I'm a known entity at this point. So people, whether I had 900,000, 500,000, 1 million, I don't think the metrics change that dramatically in terms of people all of a sudden being aware of me or me being suddenly legitimate. But what it did do was funny because in Chicago, doors that might not have opened to me, I opened, which is going to sound crazy, by showing people my Twitter account.
Right.
And they didn't know who I was. So it suddenly gave me a little bit more like, street cred or something.
Yeah.
And it was, timing of that was interesting too, because, it was a wild experience, but there were people from all over the place, and governors that wouldn't know who I was. And it was kind of like a business card in a way to be like, oh, this is me. And then they would talk to me. Just really weird.
Who were the most fun people that you met and talked with? Like, you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to so-and-so.
I mean, well, I met Tish James, and while I was standing with her, we were smiling for pictures, and I go, can I tell you that you're a fucking badass? She just kept smiling. She was, and I was like, she's a fucking badass. So that was really fun. Jasmine Crockett, I gave her forever gave her my Tide pen, because I went in to meet her because she was coming on my podcast a couple weeks later, and she was all in white because it was that day that everybody was wearing white. And she had a stain on her pants, and she was asking her staff for a Tide pen, and they didn't have any, but I did because I'm a mom, right? Like, that's how we roll. So I gave her my Tide pen, and so that was fun. She was awesome. Jared Moskowitz was amazing. He's very, very funny. That guy is hysterical in real life. I was super stoked to meet Gavin Newsom twice. Let's see. I met Claire McCaskill, which was awesome.
So you're like hanging
George
out in like a
Conway.
spin room kind of situation, or like where did these
No,
encounters occur?
So I was mostly based, I was there with some folks over at Sirius at the Progressive Channel. That was kind of my home base. So that's where I spent like most of my days,
Got it.
either recording my own podcasts or just being on podcasts. And then these people, they called it Radio Row. They would come through because they wanted to do all their hits on the different radio stations.
Right.
And they have all the stations sort of lined up and everyone has a little pod and like you have there. And so I just kind of stayed there. And people would come through and I would meet them and talk to them, like Sean Astin. It was wild. Like Sean Astin he's a big geek for this stuff. He loves policy. He's actually going to college right now just for fun to learn about this stuff.
Wow.
And meeting him was amazing and he was incredible. And let's see. Yeah, that was, and of course, Michael Cullen came to talk to me, which is the first time we met, but he came to talk to me. But I bearing the lead here because like I said, when I first got off the plane. So let me just preface this by like how the day unfolded a little bit because my plane was delayed, super delayed. And I thought I'd given myself enough time to transform from PTA mom in my little gingham dress with my hair like a disaster. Like my hair is naturally wavy, but like not cute. So I straighten it a lot. And so that it looks fancy. So, but when I fly, like who gives a fuck? So I get on the plane finally 2 hours later or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be at this show in Chicago with J.V. Pritzker and Mark Hamill and like Stephanie Miller and John Fugelsang and Hal Sparks. And I'm like, I look like I should be offering you a pie. Like honest to God, look like I should be selling blueberry pies at the state fair. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. Now, how I'm going to fix this. And I didn't have time to go to the hotel. I have the biggest frigging suitcase ever because I didn't know what to pack. So I packed everything I owned and that ended up being a good thing. So I get the damn thing is the green room's in the basement. So they had to carry this, I didn't even know, like bobsled of a suitcase downstairs, which almost killed like 4 people. But they threw it in this green room area. They closed the door and I was like, I have 15 minutes. So I don't know how, but I don't know. I
got yourself together.
Figured it out. Yeah. And so then I look kind of, I was okay. You know, the girls are out. It's fine. Party mode. And so I'm like, and I look like I'm ready to meet Mark Hamill. So I'm standing upstairs like, Mark Hamill's going to come in. I wonder if he's going to know who I am. And I just hear, is that JoJo from Jerz? And I'm like, Luke Skywalker is saying my name. He's behind me. And I met him and his lovely wife and his amazing daughter. And they ended up coming back upstairs and spending the entire show backstage until it was his turn to go out. So I talked to them, I mean, no joke, intermittently for 2 hours. And it was just, it was a trip. And then he tells me he's a fan of mine. I'm like crying. I'm like, you're Luke Skywalker. Like he's this connection to my dad because Star Wars was so special to my dad. And he took us to see the movies. And like, he's always been this connection to my dad. So meeting him made me incredibly emotional. But yes, that was amazing. J.B. Pritzker was amazing. That was really cool. Jamie Harrison was there.
And you don't have to name names, but were there people you met and you were like, oh, that guy was a douche?
There was one person I was like, wow. I was surprised by it, but I won't say who it was.
Yeah, no,
it was just, it was surprising. It was disappointing, you know, but then again, it's possible that like I applied my own meaning to it and that person could be just shy or they might have been in a bad mood or whatever.
And you were on the floor too?
Well, that's also tricky because unfortunately my credentials did not actually get me any access to the inside of the arena itself, even though I did get there somehow every day. Well, somehow.
Inside?
Oh, well, yeah. So my credentials got me into the arena, but in the periphery. So
what do you do? You like walk up to the security guard and go like, Twitter, million, and then like the velvet rope opens?
No velvet ropes. And no, I did show a couple of my kids.
Oh.
Because I was like I just want to show this to my kids. I want my kids to see this.
Sure.
I'm experiencing this. That worked. And then I would just sort of use whatever connections I had. Like the last night, I ended up hanging out in George Conway's like whatever suite, whatever they call those box whatevers, with Claudia Conway and like all these other people. There was no seats because I was like added at the very end, but I stood there the entire time. But that was really cool, and I got to go down into the belly underneath where they like the guts of the place, you know, where the players come in and the Zambonis would be and stuff. And I was wandering down there and I got to see everybody. My God, I got to see Josh Shapiro. I got to see Jessica Tarlov. I got to meet Kennedy. But then like somebody handed me a pass and they're like, go. And I got to catch Tim Walz's, the end of his speech from like 200 feet away. And that was really cool. Yeah. So it must have
been an amazing experience, especially given your trajectory and how just a few short years ago, doing something like that would have been like a fantasy, right?
Not even a fantasy. I mean, I like that's how far removed from my reality something like that would have been a few short years ago. You know, first of all, this is the first one we've had in person since 2016, right? So like that's crazy.
Right.
But I would even go back to just like 2018. You know, there's no way that I would have ever conceived of the idea of me being there, or that anyone there would have any idea who I was, or that I would have any role in any of that, because I was we've talked about this. I was in a really bad way, you know, 2016, 17, 18, before it started to change. Like I didn't even envision the future because it just looked so bleak overall to me. So to be there, and none of it's lost on me. Like, I don't want it to sound like I'm being flippant about any of this. Like, I'm a super emotional person who's very introspective and very keenly aware of how grateful I am to the universe, or to whatever has sort of been kind enough to me to have changed my life, helped me change my life in these ways. So the whole time I was there, and anytime I engage in these high level places, I'm always keenly aware of just how far I've come, but like how I was at the absolute bottom where I was done. And now I'm like, wow, this is incredible. This is exciting. I just met Mark Hamill. He knows who I am. He's a fan. Like, that's crazy. But also, more than anything, that like when I said to myself in 2016, the day after that election, the morning I was sitting in the bathroom just sobbing, and my son asked me, you know, you said the bad guy wouldn't win. How did this happen? And I had no answer. And I made a pact with myself in that moment that I was going to do anything and everything in my power to figure it out, so that I could prove to him that when I tell him and my daughter, you should do the right thing, because that's, you know, the universe rewards those who do the right thing. You should be motivated to do the right thing, to be kind, to be empathetic, you know, to be tolerant. I couldn't tell him in 2016 that was true anymore, because it wasn't, because Donald Trump had been rewarded with the highest office arguably in the world, and he's an awful person. So more than anything, me following through on trying, if it's successful or impactful or not, I never gave up on that path. And being in Chicago was sort of just an extension of me following through on my promise to my kids.
Mm-hmm. And so because stories like yours are so incredible and inspire people who are perhaps still dealing with stuff, to the extent you are comfortable, can you share with us, what was that like? I know you've had divorce stuff and marital issues, but I think sometimes it's important for people who themselves are going through stuff to hear how others have been through things and were able to come out of that.
No, I agree. And I appreciate that question, because something that has sort of been an epiphany for me in the past couple of years is that I don't want to lie or hide myself or hide my stories or hide my truth, because I realized that I didn't have anybody that I could look at who said to me, I hear you, I see you, I understand where you are. I was there too, or I'm still there a little bit too, and it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay. And I didn't have anyone to look to in my life that was out there. You know what I mean? Like, personally, that's one thing. I was so ashamed of how depressed I was. And I was depressed for a multitude of reasons. Like you said, I was in, a very toxic marriage. I felt sort of lost. I lost my personality. I lost my sense of who I was. I lost what, gave me purpose outside of my children, which is huge. But I needed more than just my children to have that kind of personal autonomy that I had in my youth. I was in a 25-year-long marriage, and just eventually I got to a point where I just felt like a function of suburban motherhood, which is I mean, not to say that suburban motherhood isn't great. It is, but it felt monotonous and it felt like I had no voice in the world. So it was depressing to the point where when I was driving alone, I would look at telephone poles like, is that the one? Is today the day? Kind of depressed. But I don't shy away from telling my story or stories now. And it's an ongoing process, right? To heal. Because I want to help maybe one person, right? If one person feels seen by me saying, oh my gosh, I get it. I was there. You know, everything felt like your shirt and my sweater and your background gray. There was no tones in the world. And what I hope maybe can help people is the transparency I have with owning my own struggles, but also trying to tell them, you know, how I found a way through and a way out of a very toxic, scary, damaging marriage, but a way through life on my own 2 feet, but also a way through my own pain, healing, all of that. And therapy was crucial for me because it opened up that part of my brain that I had not really been acknowledging for a really long time, but it helped me get all of this stuff out. And doing that, just being able to talk to somebody else to sort through why things that happened to me in my past or things that happened to me in my childhood were so impactful and had so much power over me. So what I started to do over the course of a year and a half now, it's been more than that, is reclaiming my power over my own trauma. So like deciding that it is up to me. It wasn't up to me to decide whether or not my mom was going to hit me. It wasn't up to me to decide whether I was going to be in a toxic marriage, and that's putting it generously. But what was up to me was to say, all of that exists within me. What do I want to do with that? And not everyone has the tools to be able to do that just through therapy. Lots of people need lots of other resources. For me, it was purely therapy, where I started to retrain my brain into taking these things and saying, you know what, that happened to me. That was awful. What does that teach me? Like where can I channel that to turn it the other way so that it's strength, so that I'm reclaiming it and saying, maybe my strength is I can take all my stories and say, I see you to somebody else. You know what I mean? So maybe channeling the trauma that was conditioning behaviors that I would say are bad, which is kind of unfair to say that about anything that we do in any moment that isn't driven by, you know, malevolence is bad, because you do what you do to get by and survive. And you can't really blame yourself. So you should give yourself grace for that. But my sense now is that maybe if I can take all of those things that I went through and have turned into my own personal power and help somebody else who's really going through it, and then it'll all be worth it. And that really makes me feel super powerful. But also, I have these conversations with my friends all the time, even in my interpersonal relationships, even with my daughter. You know, when she's being bullied at school, and she gets bullied a lot, it's terrible. I now have learned how to talk to my daughter about understanding a couple of things. Understanding that it's not about her, it's about the bully, right? And that she has to try and be empathetic to that, but also that when someone does that to her, she can take it in. But what she does then is her choice. So she wants to take it in and confirm it, like you're fat, or you're ugly, or you have stupid hair, or whatever. She has the choice to take it in and confirm it, or push it back out and say, no, thank you. I don't accept that. I know who I am. I know I'm loved. I know I'm beautiful. And so we have those conversations all the time. And so I guess to a very long answer, because it's not an easy answer. Yeah, if my stories and my struggles, and I am very open about all of it. I'm 50 and I don't have anything to hide anymore. If it helps even one person out there feel like they can do it, they can get through it, that they can take each day at a time, and that they will eventually thrive, then it'll be worth it. That's my goal.
You know, and it's interesting because we're all different and we all have different tools in our tool belt. Some of us don't even have a tool belt. But it's clear you have a pretty big tool belt. Very smart, very articulate, very resourceful. And I think it's important for people when they are hitting a low point in their lives to trust their instincts and utilize those tools, because that's the stuff that gets you out You know, I've been through trauma. You've been through like I always felt like I'm just lucky that I had tools to get out of my situation. I know a lot of people that don't have those tools, and it's not something you go in a store and buy. It's just DNA, man. You know, it's just like stuff you're born with and what you're able to do with that, because that could take you a long way. I mean, I remember when you first started on Twitter, and I would say to you, like, yeah, great, you're doing a great job. And now, like, I feel like I should sit down and be asking you for advice because you're so good at what you do. You just have this special sauce that you have a voice that's gotten so unique and resonates so well with people, and you speak for a lot of people.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I appreciate that you appreciate the special sauce I keep in my tool belt, because that doesn't sound like sexual innuendo at all. But moving on.
That's me. I'm all about the sexual. And
how I turn.
Can't get the sex off my mind, Joe. You know what I mean?
How I turn a compliment.
Literally, just say anything to me, and I'll turn into sexual innuendo.
That's me. I mean, obviously, that's me. I just took you a beautiful compliment because I'm a weirdo and turned it into like a sex thing. But thank you for real. Thank you for that, because it means a lot to me, because I have so much respect for you. You're also one of the smartest people out there, but I appreciate that. Is really very kind of you. And you were one of the first people who ever reached out to me, which was really supportive and nice, and just sort of like acknowledged that you were like, I see you out there. You're doing a great job. And I was like, oh my gosh, hi. And it was amazing. My Twitter social media experience very much matches my own personal growth. It's really weird the way they mimic each other. So I don't know which came first, right? The chicken or the egg, but like my voice out there was evolving and changing and reflecting more and more of what was inside of me as I was coming back to knowing myself in real life at the same time. Like that process of therapy, of retraining my brain to turn, trauma into power, to turn criticism into, learning. That process was also underway in its own strange way with my voice and my confidence in my voice and my clarity on what I wanted to say on social media. So those two things, one couldn't really exist without the other. And so I kind of think it's an interesting thing, my positions on things, what sort of bubbled up as the most important things to me over these years, because it, at first it was everything, everything that was wrong, all the ills in the world. And it still is a lot of that, but there's a few issues. Gun violence prevention, for one. Protecting democracy, obviously. This is a big one. But there are a few issues that have become central to my core. And understanding that about myself also gave my voice on social media more of like a refined sort of focus, where it seemed like before I was just like, a little bit, where everybody was like, she's all out there a little bit, which I still am. But I am more myself in real life than I've ever been in my entire existence, maybe other than when I was a little kid and just like a total freak brat. And I'm more myself on social media than I've ever been, as long as I've been on social media.
Well, I would imagine it's truly exciting to get to a point where you achieve a big level of success, and like you found not just your voice, but you also found your audience.
It's weird because I think that it's very strange. It's going to sound weird. As much as I love and truly appreciate and am like honored by and floored by people, following me, I hate that word, but whatever, or like, saying you say what we think, that's amazing to me. But I don't want to ever start thinking about what they'll think about what I say. Do you know what I mean? So like, I want to just always, I say it because I feel it, because I think it, because it's who I am, because it's true to my core, my soul. And I say it in the way I say it because that's the way I talk. You know what I mean?
A lot of F-bombs out there.
A lot of F-bombs. My God. It's gotten to the point where my kids, when we're driving, are like, Mom, but wait, fuck, you see that fucking right turn? Just took it to the middle of the other lane.
You say it, Mom.
That all the time. You say fuck. I'm like, I earned the right to say fuck. I'm 50. And then I do a kick like Molly Shannon. I'm 50. I can say fuck. And there's nothing like a well-placed fuck when you're 50, but not when you're 14. That's not, my dad would have slapped me upside the head if I said fuck in front of him. I'm like, God, you even imagine? So I think, I say the things I want to say the way they want to say it. And, well, I'm very deliberate when it comes to the messages about trying to help people feel seen when they might not feel seen, or trying to help people through a struggle. that's a little bit different. I am thinking about them then, but I really am, because I'm hoping that I can help them. But the rest of it, like my tweets and stuff, it's amazing to me. It's still shocking to me in many ways that anybody gives a shit, because it's like, wow, that's cool. But I just have to keep sticking to who I am, what I want to say, how I want to say it, and just doing that, because I was kept quiet. I was really sometimes I think of it as like a boot on my neck for a long, long time, where I
hard to
couldn't
imagine
say.
you being kept quiet.
You would not have recognized me, Andy, 6 years ago. 2018, 17, 16. You could have passed me on the street, and I swear to you that you would not have any idea who I was, on the inside or the outside. There was nothing about me that felt alive, other than when I was with my kids. Always with my kids. That was the thing I'd always wanted all my life, and I'm so grateful the universe bestowed this incredible gift upon me. But other than that, and even in the midst of that, my personal soul felt like it was evaporated. So I changed on the inside and the outside, because it's been this process, but I was kept quiet in a way. And I was for a very long time. So now I have something to say. I'm just going to say it. I don't know how much time I've got left on this rock. I'm not going to waste a breath.
And people recognize it. I mean, I'm sitting at my TV earlier this year, sat down at 11:30 with my popcorn to watch Saturday Night Live. And a few minutes in or whatever, there's a political skit. I guess I'm trying to remember. It was like a talk show. And they
the Barry Gibb talk show.
Yeah, the Barry Gibb talk show, right? And there's a political panel, and one of the guests on the panel is Joanne Carducci. And I'm like, wait, I know that name. And then it's like, she's blonde, and she's being played by Dakota
Johnson.
And I'm like, and then they start talking. I'm like, holy shit, that's JoJo. That's JoJo. And I couldn't believe it, because that to me said, you've arrived, right? You're on the radar, but your phone was blowing up at that time, right?
You were one of the first people to tell me. You were this. It was you and Brooklyn Bad Defiant, but you were the second. It might have been the first. I can't remember if this all still so surreal that it's all kind of muddled in my mind now. It's this misty dream, because it doesn't make sense still. But yeah, my phone's and then you guys are the first ones, and then it started in like real time, like whoa, and it was nuts. It's still surreal, because my kids were up. We weren't watching anything. They were looking at their phones. Did we have this conversation yet? I was doing an ab workout.
A what?
On my daughter. I was doing an ab workout at midnight on my daughter's. I'm weird. I'll work out late if I can. If I didn't get in during the day, I don't feel like I can sleep, because it makes me anxious. So I'll work out late at night. I'll just do sleep, whatever. I'm a weirdo. Okay. I'm a freak. So I'm working out. TV's not on. And we're all up, and the texts start coming in, and I was trying to tell all of you, like, no, you're confused. It's got to be your closed captioning. This is a practical joke. Like, not whatever you think is happening. It's not me. Like, first of all, I was confused, because I was like, no, I'm obviously home, and it's Saturday Night Live, not Saturday Night Live, but Saturday Night Taped. So I'm like, no, clearly I'm not on Saturday Night Live. And then by the time people were sending me clips, and then by the time someone sent me a clip, maybe it was you, maybe it was Brooklyn, I don't know, of Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon singing my name as Bee Gees.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
Now so then I just kind of checked out. I thought I had died. What I thought makes sense was that, because nothing else made sense, was that I had literally died, electrocuted myself, I don't know, over-abbed, I don't know, but whatever you do. I don't know how you do that, but that I died, and this was some weird afterlife. That was what I thought.
Crazy.
So I had my kids physically pinch me, because I thought I was dead.
And were they impressed? Like, did you get like serious mom points, or were they embarrassed?
For about 15 minutes, maybe.
All right, well, that's something.
They were no, my kids, they keep me extremely humble, which is awesome. They don't give a shit. They're just like, okay, Mom, you stop talking about it now. So by the morning, when I'm still talking about it with my friends, my son is like, okay, I get it, whatever. You think you can make us breakfast?
Like, it like brings you right back down to earth Kids have a way of doing that.
They really.
But that was awesome. And did you ever find out like who,
Nope.
how the whole like, how did you
Nope.
get on Saturday Night Live?
No idea.
You know, somebody was
I
aware
knew.
of you. You know.
Anybody out there, like if you know, I would like die to know.
I want to ask you about politics. How are you feeling
Yeah.
about the campaign? Optimistic?
Well, yeah. I think this is. You know how much I love Joe Biden, and everybody knows how much I love Joe Biden, and how
I know.
much
I've
was
seen the
riding
photos.
Yeah. And honestly, what has given me so much hope is that given how dramatic that was, given how emotional that was for him, for so many people, for the hardcore base like me, for a lot of people on the different fringes of the party, but the fact that everybody coalesced in this moment that could have, I mean, really worn us apart forever, irreparably forever, it didn't. It didn't, and that has given me even more hope. But it also did that, and it also made me even more determined to make sure that she wins, because I love her anyway. But like him giving up what he gave up for her to take over, to me means that as someone who cares about him deeply, that I'm going to do even more than I would have done before to make sure we make good on his sacrifice. And so I think that a lot of people feel that way.
Well, that's really
People love
interesting
Joe.
because his legacy will be amazing if she wins. But if she doesn't, that's not a pretty picture. Let's just say Trump ends up winning. It's going to be a hard time for Joe. And a lot of people are going to question, did he do the right thing? Would he have won? Fortunately, I think she's going to win. But you feel like she's going to win?
Yeah, so I'm not putting any carts in front of any horses because I don't want to say definitively that she's going to win, even though my heart believes that right will prevail. My heart truly believes. I'm an idealist, I guess, in many ways about the people of this country. And my heart believes that there is more that connects us than divides us. And at the end of the day, that we are largely a good people who want good things for ourselves and for everyone we love. And I think we know enough. We know enough about Donald Trump at this point, whether or not you're a Republican, independent, a Democrat, unless you live under a rock, really, honestly, you know what you're getting with Donald Trump. And you also have now two other metrics on the board that we didn't have before, which are Dobbs and Roe being stripped from us, and what that's looked like for women in this country and girls in this country is grim, to say the very least, already in just a few years. So we have that metric we never had to contend with before. And now we also have January 6th, and we've now seen, and I think largely was memory hold because Republicans have been working to memory hold, but also it was traumatic, and a lot of people like didn't want to go back there. So it was out of the like conversation a little bit in this election, which it can't be. But the last couple of days have put it back in our laps where it belongs, because J.D. Vance, thank you very much, J.D. Vance, Walz asked him one simple question: did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? And J.D. Vance couldn't answer it. The only reason J.D. Vance is on that stage is because he's replacing Mike Pence, who would not upend the results of an election Donald Trump lost. And J.D. Vance couldn't say Donald Trump lost that election. So that put the conversation back in our laps as it should have. And then Jack Smith's filing the next day, which has nothing to do with the timing related to J.D. Vance's debate performance, because it was Judge Chutkan who released the redacted filing, not the Department of Justice. That put the conversation back in our laps even more so, because now you have people in Donald Trump's inner circle not only saying that he knew he lost, that he understood that even if he lost, he was going to fight, and he was telling people that he was going to fight. But you have that moment where he is told that Mike Pence is under threat, that Mike Pence is in terrible danger, that there's been a person shot and potentially killed while he's watching TV, and he goes back to watching TV after saying, so what?
So what?
Right? So what? And anybody who disbelieves that hasn't been paying attention, but he also didn't even dispute it. What he said in response was all blah, 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 DOJ's weaponizing, blah, 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 blah. Then he said something that was extremely telling. It's just the same old stuff from before. The same old stuff from before. Not, it's not true. I've never said it's not true. It's the same old stuff you know is true from before, just a little bit different. So,
but he never denies the message. He just shoots the messenger. That's his MO.
Yeah, right. And then you have Republicans who've been trying every which way they can to sane wash and whitewash and revise the reality of that day. You have them out there. Then Scott freaking Summer Pizza Walker comes out and says the American people are long over January 6th. This is the party that flies the Confederate flag up here in New Jersey, by the way, everywhere. You guys get over the Civil War and I'll get over January 6th. So that's where they are. They want us to, even J.D. Vance said that Donald Trump transfer power peacefully on January 6th.
That was an insane moment.
It's Orwellian. It's do not believe your own eyes and ears. It's honest to God. Believe me. Don't believe what you saw, what you heard. Gaslighting. And so
J.D. Vance understands what his boss doesn't. J.D. Vance understands that if you smile and you appear warm and compassionate and nice and civil, you can lie through your teeth and it actually might have impact.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Bundy knew that too.
Yeah.
So
nice reference, by the way.
Thank you very much. But I mean, it was successful in one way, in that to someone who's not been paying attention, and that's a lot of the country, right? That's a whole lot. We forget. We do this all the time. We talk about this all day long. Everybody we know talks about this all day long. There's a whole lot of people in this country who are like, I don't know this J.D. Vance guy or this Tim Walz guy. Like, check out this vice presidential debate. I don't know anything. I know who Donald Trump is and I know a little bit about Kamala. But let me check out these two guys. So they tune in. They're like, okay, they both seem pretty reasonable. This guy over here, this Tim guy's a little nervous in the beginning. I don't know, but that China thing is weird, but I don't know how that impacts me. But this guy, JD, he's got big blue eyes. He seems totally normal. He's very articulate. He seems well informed. And then you get to that question. I mean, that honestly, that question was the moment of the debate. Every debate has one moment that, if you didn't watch it or if you did, has one moment that it's remembered for forever. Like it was, you're no Jack Kennedy, sir. Lloyd Benson. Yeah. You had the moment where McCain, says to the person who's criticizing Obama, like, no, don't do that. This debate, the moment was when J.D. Vance refused to say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. So if anybody got to that point, which not a lot of people did, honestly, it was wonky, but it was also, I'll make the other point in a second, civil, which is boring to us now. But that was the moment that defined the debate. So I think a lot of that got wiped away. And if people watched it or didn't watch it, the clips they were seeing all the next day were of that. Not of his answer, non-answer on abortion, not of his answer, non-answer on healthcare. Like, it was, this guy can't even admit that his running mate lost in 2020. And so I feel like that was very defining. But something else that was interesting, because you and I were actually texting about it, and we disagreed, because a lot of people came down on a little harshly on Tim Walz and said, he lost the debate, he got killed in the debate. Like, why wasn't he being more aggressive or tenacious, or why wasn't he firing back? Why wasn't he being more of like Coach Tim? And I had a 22-year-old colleague say to me, I've never seen a civil debate. I've never seen in her life, since she's been dialed into politics, right? So you're talking about like probably 2016, maybe. She's never seen one where they weren't jabbing, fighting, insulting, screaming, shouting, over talking. I mean, Donald Trump has been a part of all of them. Right. So here you have two dudes from the Midwest, and JD, like, yeah, he's dressing himself up as a little bit nicer than he probably is. I don't even know if that's the truth, or if I don't even know, because he's a psycho. But like Tim Walz being civil and nice and complimentary and trying to give JD the benefit of the doubt while trying to make his point at the same time, I think there's a case to be made for that civility. I think there's a case to be made for the country needing to see that we are trying to say that this is what we want to return to. And we're so indoctrinated with vitriol, with rage, with conflict, with fury and fighting. And we're so braced for that all the time that, like, we don't actually realize that we need it.
Sure.
We need to.
Yeah, but my feeling was that Tim Walz did win, but he won, like, if it was a baseball game, he won 1-0.
Yeah, okay.
And he could have won 8-0. Maybe I'm just a jaded New Yorker. It's like, all right, let's knock off the Midwestern nice guy thing. It's like, you can go after your opponent without being a douche. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can do it in a nice, respectful way, like he did with what he said to J.D. Vance in that moment about the election in 2020 was exactly the way Tim Walz was on brand and could have addressed so many other things. That's my point.
Well, you're right. You're right, but I'm not disagreeing with you there. The only problem is the thing that Tim Walz faced, which Joe Biden faced in his debate and Kamala Harris faced in her debate, was that you have to choose between going back at them and their disinformation or their record and highlighting your own. And sometimes if people don't hear what you're for and only hear what that guy is lying about or what they're against, then they see nothing in you that's like good for them. So it's like, well, I get it. He's not good for me, but I still don't know you or what you want to do for me. So I think what Tim did also was that he managed to highlight the differences without focusing on what JD actually said until that moment, because that's a moment that isn't about, I need you to hear me navigate you through this idea of trusting women and doctors and why that's under threat right now. I need you to hear what I'm having to say on that because I want you to understand the differences. But that moment on the election is so binary.
Right. But think about this. You just brought up abortion, which I'm glad you did. Think about if Tim Walz had done the same thing on abortion that he did with the election. During that back and forth, if he just looked at Vance and said, JD, simple question. Should a woman be in charge of her body? Think of the impact of that.
Not disagreeing, but like to your point, though, a win is a win is a win. And that win in particular moves the needle only so much and would have moved the needle only so much. So if he won 4-0 or 1-0, we still walked away with the same viral clip. We still walked away with the same holy shit. We still walked away with the same, Tim is this nice, genuinely nice guy. A lot of people walked away with this, JD doesn't seem like a psycho, which is nuts. But they still heard him say, whether it was that night or whether they heard it the next day, they still heard him say, I want to talk about the responsibility of Kamala Harris and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you're not answering the question. So I guess you are right about a lot of that. And I think that East Coasters and us like to punch back a little bit or punch first a little bit. But
forget about
we also haven't had a politician like Tim Walz in a really long time.
No, it's so true. And it is a breath of fresh air. And I mean, look, I would do anything for these two to help them win. But, I'm worried. I certainly am not at a point where I'm like, wow, Tim Walz was like the greatest choice and he's going to help the ticket. Like, we don't know. None of us know. How would Josh Shapiro have done in that debate? But you are right. And it is something that I think most people were happy to see. At least forget JD's nonstop lying, because that's something else. But at least have two people on a stage that can talk to each other, even if one of them is lying through his teeth, in a fairly civil, respectful way, and say that they agree with each other on so much stuff, which was kind of bizarre. But we'll see. I mean, there's 5 weeks left. It is going to be cray-cray between now and then. Fingers crossed on this outcome, because this is it. This is it. So anyway, it was fun having you on. I love your insights. I love hearing more of the JoJo story. So keep fighting the good fight, because your voice is so important.
Thank you so much for that, for all of that. And I appreciate it. And so I will do one last thing with my voice of this moment, which is to just implore people in every state, red or blue or otherwise, to go out and check your registration. Make sure that your voter registration is set, because the windows are closing for being able to do it. And Republicans have been up to some fuckery and getting people off rolls and making it harder. Also check, what do I need? My state doesn't require ID, but maybe yours does. Maybe yours changed the ID. And in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina students were able to use their digital IDs, and now they can't to vote. So make sure you're registered. Make sure your voice is heard. Your vote is your voice. I'm not telling you how to vote, but I'm telling you I'm imploring you to participate. But in order to participate, you have to make sure that you can vote. So please, it takes 2 seconds. Your vote and the impact it will have on the future is a whole lot longer lasting. So just make sure that you are still registered to vote, and that you know all the places all the things you need and where you're supposed to be. So all of that stuff.
And I'll just put one punctuation on that. This election is going to be all about turnout. Period. Yeah. End of story. Joe, be good. Talk soon.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.